Hi, I'm Neera Tanden, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." With the election upon us here in the US, these next few weeks on Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, we're sharing a series of Lotus for POTUS conversations, hearing insights from leading edge voices to help inform and get out the vote. A few months ago, I created a meme with the photo of Vice President Harris that went, in Sanskrit, Kamla means lotus, in America, Kamla means POTUS. And for me and many others, that sentiment sums up the imperative choice we're making at the highest level, being thoughtful about our past, present, and future. Now, Neera Tanden is someone who has had a front row seat at both the campaign and policy level, with decades of experience as an advisor and a leader. Prior to her roles in the Biden-Harris administration, Neera was the president and CEO of the Center for American Progress, one of the largest and most important think tanks in the country. She served in both the Obama and Clinton administrations, and Neera has also been a policy advisor to Hillary Clinton in the White House, the Senate, and her campaigns. She currently serves as an assistant to the president and director of the Domestic Policy Council, which drives the development and implementation of President Biden's domestic policy agenda. Previously, she was senior advisor and staff secretary in the White House, where she was responsible for presidential decision-making. So it was great to catch up with her about the campaign and what's resonating for her, as I was particularly curious about hearing what was both compelling and unique about Kamala Harris as a presidential candidate.
So I've known her for over a decade. I met her when she was Attorney General. I met her when she was a Senate candidate, and of course, when she was a senator and then running for president. So my experience with Kamala is that she is a person focused on the practical impacts of things on people's lives. Where a lot of people in Washington can kind of think of things at a national level, she really wants to translate policies into what they mean for everyday families. That can sound kind of trite, but I've worked for a lot of political leaders, and not all of them think about what it means for people. And so she also thinks about how we implement legislation, what the real impact is. But I also, and I think this is somewhat fundamental, is she has a lived experience. We've talked about how her mom made chapatis and, how she's visited India and how her grandfather was a supporter of the independence movement and a strong believer in civil rights.
Yeah.
And, I just think that all of those various facets of her life will make her a unique president with
Yeah.
a vantage point from a lot of experiences that, many previous presidents haven't had.
When you think about this, it's so exciting to hear that from someone of your perspective, that she definitely has the kind of micro level kitchen table perspectives for everyday families, but then also she's executed on so much in her career as well. And again, you're someone who has some great depth of perspective on this. Are there specific elements of her record that voters who are kind of still figuring it out and they're getting to know her right now, that they should look at to specifically, with respect, of course, to American progress and innovation? Are there specific elements of her record that really stand out right now?
Yeah, so I'd say, she has an experience as a California senator representing, first as, she obviously came up in San Francisco. She has a real understanding of innovation. And, I'd say there's a lot of people in Washington who really couldn't explain what a tech company is or what social media really is. And
Yeah.
she's very facile with these issues. She's engaged with a lot of leaders in Silicon Valley. She's engaged with a lot of business leaders throughout California. And I think my experience with her and talking with her, I remember we had a conversation back in 2018 or 2019 on CAP had been doing, I ran this think tank, the Center for American Progress, and we'd been doing a
Yeah.
lot of work on essentially America's competitive edge and how we invest in our competitive edge. And And this is the thing about Kamala. She can have both thoughts, and both thoughts are
Mm,
true, which is one, our competitiveness is built on the fact that our companies are the most innovative in the world, and that what really builds a middle class is strong wages for people, and both of those things can be a virtuous cycle, and you see that with a lot
mm,
of technology companies and some of our most innovative companies, which they do pay people pretty well and get good returns on those dollars. So that's kind of that experience of representing California, of representing Silicon Valley, of representing a very diverse state, and
yeah.
having the experience she has, I think allows her to have kind of a global perspective.
I wonder now, I think about this a lot because of the aspect of healthcare, but thinking of her record, thinking of all she's doing for a whole variety of issues, whether that's border security, whether that is
Hmm.
healthcare, whether that's really geopolitics and what's going on at the international level, because she has such a diverse set of professional experiences and the ability to really connect with people. For you, as someone who sits at the sort of policy advising
Hmm.
level, does that just make your job easier?
It does, it's a lot easier to have a principal who's steeped in the issues, I will say. But
Yeah.
let me just take an example of something that I think really demonstrates her kind of experience. So she's done a lot of work on access to capital, and
Mm,
access to capital for all communities. And her experience in California, her experience in San Francisco, she recognizes that access to capital is crucial for innovation. I mean, obviously, small business development writ large, there are inequities in access to capital. There's ways in which we don't take this. Banks don't take into account certain experiences. So she's been really focused on it as VP on how we strengthen CDFIs, how do we strengthen access to capital for all communities, because she's seen how individuals who have great ideas can build and
yeah.
grow wealth. And what she's talked about in this, and I'd say she's worked very closely with Treasury, with Secretary Yellen and Wally Adeyemo, to ensure that we are expanding access to capital. And when we look at our overall numbers as an administration, we've seen a big growth in small businesses over the last 3 years. And, we're very proud of the fact that we've seen a big growth of small businesses, but also women entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs, Asian entrepreneurs, Latino entrepreneurs. So she really believes in an expanding model of growth that also
Yeah.
brings everyone to the table. And there are just tools that the government has to ensure that everyone has that access. But obviously, it's up to every entrepreneur to be able to build in the market.
Yeah, and providing, I mean, I love the whole idea of an opportunity economy, giving advantages to small businesses and really promoting entrepreneurship. But then at the same time, right, making sure that, where it hits home with child tax credits and making
Yeah.
sure that we can advance family leave and all the different things that matter when it comes to really supporting the economy.
Yeah, and I just want to say on those issues, she's also sees the connection to this, to
Yeah.
family policy and economic policy. So
Yeah.
she's been a strong advocate for childcare, paid leave, elder care, but it's not that
Right.
she just sees this as in a vacuum. During
Mm,
the pandemic, I worked with her to strengthen investments in childcare because she knew a lot of women were kept out of the workforce from the pandemic, and childcare was a crucial ingredient to getting women back in the workforce. We did increase a lot of childcare investments, and now women's workforce participation is back to where it was. In fact, a little higher than it was
mm,
pre-pandemic. And that's an example of understanding the interconnection between family policy, like childcare, and what it really means for economic growth. And as you know, to really keep growing, we need to ensure workforce participation remains high. That's one of the reasons why she's such a strong advocate of childcare and has delivered real results. The
yeah.
president and the American Rescue Plan, the president and the vice president delivered, large investment in childcare, which has really made a difference for families across the country.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge win, and it's an ongoing evolution that I know that she's going to advance even more. I was just sharing that we met at a Indian American function, a couple of years ago, and now at this kind of moment in our history, for you as an Indian American, as a woman who leads, what's resonating loudly for you that actually all Americans can really be proud of, particularly as Kamala Harris is running now?
Yeah, it's so interesting because this is the third administration that I've worked in. I worked in the Clinton White House and the Obama White House and now in the Biden Harris White House. And I would say, when I started out in politics, I'll say a few decades ago, I was, there was really just a handful of Asian Americans. And, you could
Yeah,
count on your literally hand the number of Indian Americans, South Asians
right.
in the White House. And I remember back then, my parents were asking me, why am I working in politics instead of going to be at a law firm or
Right.
something that was a much more traditional route? And, it's just been heartening to see the advance of Asian Americans and South Asian Americans. Now at the White House, there were a number of South Asians who are assistants to the president,
Yeah.
myself and Iredi, Arthur Prabhakar, who runs the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Vinay is the president's chief speechwriter. So there's been a huge advance. But, I think we should remember we're really at a crucial moment. And
Mm,
while it's so incredible to have a vice president and a president and nominee of a major party who is Indian American, the daughter of an Indian immigrant woman who,
yeah.
traveled the globe at 19 to really honestly have a chance at an American dream. It is like such a resonant story for me. The
Yeah.
story of Shamala Gopalan's journey to America is such a resonant story for, me thinking about my parents who came in the 50s and 60s. So but I also think we should understand that we're also at a moment where we're seeing a great divide on this really central question, which is again, like, is the country really for Shamala Gopalan's daughter and my children and the story that all of us bring, which is immigrants who travel to this country, go through tremendous journeys to just be American, have access to the ideals of America? Or do we have a different vision, which is the
Mm,
country is really just for some of us and not for all of us? And really we think back to a time when the country didn't have leaders that looked like us and didn't really put people who look like us in positions of power. And I think if we want to be really candid, what's at stake in these debates about diversity or
yeah.
other issues
Everything.
or uh, attacking Haitian migrants with really disgusting, vile accusations, it really is whether we're protecting in America
Mm,
where leaders only looked one way, where
yeah.
political leaders, business leaders, civic leaders, or that the ideals of America are for all of us. And what makes America actually truly great is that you can hold these ideals and you can succeed and you can capture the American dream. And I know it sounds cliche, but you can capture the American dream even if you're the child of an immigrant from India and another immigrant from Jamaica. And I
Yeah.
think that is really the story of this election. Obviously Kamala is going to be campaigning. She's a candidate for all Americans, but she also has a lived experience that will, for the first time in a unique way, represent a group of Americans, and I've underlined a group of Americans that haven't had full representation.
I think that's such an important key distinctive thing to recognize, right? That like, her message is including everyone in the tent as opposed and looking forward as
Mhm.
opposed to someone looking backward. On that note of looking forward, what, again, as someone with your experience and your perspective, what does a Harris Waltz administration what is that going to likely look like for the majority of Americans? What's your thoughts on, sure, this is a campaign, but what do people have to look forward to? Because in the end, that's what they're hopefully putting their trust and their hopes in.
Absolutely. And I think this is a great question. And, what I really think we all have to look forward to is a range of policies that are focused on really the practical. So,
Mm,
when she's talking about a middle class tax cut or investments in small businesses or entrepreneurs or childcare, it is really the practical way we are improving people's lives. And, I think she'll look out for costs for families. She'll be really mindful of the burdens on families. It's another way she thinks about childcare costs. It's
mm,
huge burdens for families. She'll continue to fight on particular issues like lowering drug costs and ways in which we have been successful in sort of taking on some special interests. But I think she'll also, I really do think her North Star will be, and I've had conversations with her, I've been in briefings with her. Her North Star
yeah.
really is, how does this policy affect a family? How does this policy
Mm,
affect a family that's struggling? I remember during the transition almost 4 years ago, when we were thinking through the American Rescue Plan, she was really focused on, how do we get money out the door quickly to families who are struggling now? We can talk
yeah.
all we want about this policy versus this policy, but if one policy is not going to help until 8 months from now or a year from now, that policy is a lot different in people's lived experience. And so that's really, I think, a lot of political leaders come through different routes. Her experience was as a prosecutor. She was really on the ground. She saw how things affect people on the ground, and she's really brought that experience forward.
I love that. And I mean, I think again, thinking of policy at the highest level from what it looks like at the kitchen table for a family, for any family, no matter, where they're coming from and who they look like. I think that's critical. One last thought here is for the voters who are on the edge, for those people still kind of, again, figuring it out, what's your message to them? Especially for those folks who are either just getting to know and learn about Kamala Harris, or for that matter, still figuring it out.
Yeah, I'd say this really comes down to a couple of things that I'd emphasize. I think a big difference in this election is that I know Kamala Harris and Tim Walz both very well. There are people who are going to think about your lives. They're not going to
Mm,
think about who their latest grievances with or what group they can attack or what political leader they can malign. They're really going to get up every day and think about, how can we make progress to make your life a little easier, to pay your bills or to address needs. I think that is really lost in our political debate. So I'm happy to talk
mm,
about how Kamala has a plan to grow the economy and ensure it grows for everyone by focusing on small businesses and expanding access to capital to all communities, or how she's going to get a middle class tax cut, or how she's going to invest in childcare, or even on foreign policy, her focus on defending Ukraine and ensuring America has allies throughout the world. I can talk about any of those issues because she's
reproductive rights, the whole thing.
reproductive,
Yeah.
and how central reproductive rights are for her, and
Yeah.
democracy, and how she's really gotten a lot done on voting rights. So I can talk about all those issues, but fundamentally, I've worked for a number of political leaders, and I'm very proud to have worked with so many. But the thing that distinguishes our most successful presidents are the people who really do get up every morning and think about how they can make progress for other people.
Mm.
And it's because it's a through line for them, it's a through line for their administration. And when it's a through line for the administration, people really do make progress on those goals. And I think she'll be a leader who excels at that.
Well, whether it's progress at the policy level or a through line for the American people, Neera, we thank you so much for joining us. This was really a treat, and really wish you all the best.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Thanks so much, Neera. Remember, conversation is the antidote to apathy. So go to vote.gov for information about registering and to kamalaharris.com to learn more about the Harris-Walz campaign. Please get involved, get engaged, and get informed about all your local issues and candidates up and down the ballot. Till next time, I'm Abhay Dandekar.